Before prepaying your funeral, know your rights. Want to plan your funeral now? Want to be sure that your family doesn't have to pay for your funeral? You can pre-plan your own funeral and pay for it in advance. But before doing so, you should know about New York State's laws that regulate prepaid funeral money. This brochure explains your rights under the law and the decisions you need to make when pre-planning or prepaying your own funeral, or that of a friend or relative. What is the difference between pre-planning and prepaying? You can pre-plan your funeral without paying now, but be sure to compare several funeral homes before deciding.